Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Jason Perot. Thanks for being on the show, Jason.
Thanks for having me, Whitney. Glad to be here.
Jason started investing in real estate in 2001 while working his day job in medical device sales. Currently owns nearly 650 apartment units in the Erie, Pennsylvania market. He's a president of the local apartment association, representing 1,600 landlord investors. Jason, thanks again for being on the show, and tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this real estate business, and then specifically syndication.
Okay. I'll try to give you the quick version, but my wife and I bought our first duplex in 2001. At the time, we were both working our day jobs, a few years out of college. The thing that really interested me about real estate investing was during college, I'd done a couple internships with some financial planning companies, and the planners had me going through their files, setting up appointments with all of their customers. And at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot about money. I was just a poor college student, but I really wanted to make money. And I saw a common theme amongst any of the high net worth clients is that they all had real estate. They all had investment real estate. And, it's sort of the lesson of like the millionaire next door. I'd look at, a doctor and lawyer, dual income family, and their net worth was like, negative or even. And then you'd have, two school teachers making a combined total of like $80,000 a year, but multimillionaires, and it was all through real estate. So that piece of information, or that kind of aha moment, really got me interested in real estate and investing. And of course, like probably everybody in the real estate business, you stumble across Rich Dad Poor Dad, and real estate investing seemed like the perfect fit. So started out the old fashioned way. My wife and I saved one person's paycheck, lived off of one, dumped the other paycheck into buying real estate, saved up our down payments, and just kind of rapidly, but still seemed like a really slow time of building up our portfolio. When reached about 290 units in 2012, I was able to leave my day job. And my wife had left her day job a couple years ahead of that. But again, during that time, it was a lot of, we did some deals with owner financing, a lot of things off the MLS, a lot of smaller properties. And then along the way, we'd stumble across a 20 unit or a 15 unit or some interesting package. So left the day job at the end of 2012. And since then, really was able to dive into some, private lending, joint venture type of opportunities. And then this past fall, syndicated our first two deals. And the first one was more of was a smaller deal, 40 units, ton of upside. And then the larger one was 86 units, and we syndicated that, all located again in the Erie market. But what was really interesting about syndication, it seemed like the next step was that we're able to grow larger, faster, deeper, and kind of create a more interesting portfolio by adding a ton of value to our investors. So what was really interesting to me and the way I approached it was that over the years, we built a lot of relationships with family, friends, just professional colleagues that were looking for alternative investments. And I felt like I could add a ton of value to folks whose only knowledge of investing was putting money away into their 401ks or the stock market. And they had no idea of anything else. So I approached it from the standpoint that, look, I'm adding value. I'm able to educate them on alternative investments and investments that will not only provide them equity, but immediate cash flow.
Nice. So, I think a lot of the listeners can relate to your story in a big way, but, getting started, especially while you're both still working full time, can you just go through maybe some of the difficulties that you and your wife faced while trying to do it full time and help the listener that's in those shoes?
Sure. I think the difficulties could be not only in your professional life, trying to keep the wheels on the bus for your day job, because, you have to keep the golden goose alive. So being dedicated to your employer, but at the same time, giving 100% to your real estate investing, but at the same time, you need to give 100% to your family life and your social life. So when they talk about burning the candle at both ends, I think that's really the biggest challenge. So, once you commit to leaving your job or growing your real estate business, you can't lose sight of the things that are important. Your family's number one, and I'd be lying if I didn't say, it definitely puts stress on your marriage or your friendships. And I think looking back, the advice I would have given my younger self, and probably anybody in the same position, would be, take time. Don't burn yourself out trying to grow the business. I mean, the more you relax, but yet stay focused, good things are going to happen. So don't obsess about it to a fault. And maybe that was part of just being younger, in our 20s and 30s. And then you sort of go through life a little bit and end up relaxing a little bit, because I found that this business is very, very forgiving, and also can provide you the type of freedom to be able to work from a beach somewhere, or be able to work remotely. And, you don't have to work 100 hours a week to be successful in this business.
So you went from the duplex in 2001 to 290 units to 2012. Was all that from working off the one, or investing the one income?
Correct. Yes. Well, I'd say the vast majority of that. So was fortunate enough in 2012 that had received an offer from a local company, Erie Insurance, who needed some property to complete the construction of their parking garage, as well as some other space near their headquarters. So I didn't make a ton of money on that sale, but I realized it was time to take a profit and 1031 exchange that into some other properties. So we were at 290 units, sold off about 30 units, and then added another 30 units. So it was sort of a wash in terms of unit count, but was able to kind of transition out of maybe some lower end properties, C and D quality, up into a B plus type of property. And I think that that was the only time we didn't have the discipline of saving that other person's salary. But that was a fun sacrifice. When our friends were all buying fancier cars, taking better vacations, we sort of prided ourselves on, hey, we're building this portfolio that's going to allow us to retire at an early age. So I feel like now we have the last laugh, because we can travel when we want, we can do what we want, when we want, how we want it. But at the time, I think I even questioned my sanity and thought I was crazy at times for saving that much money and putting it into the business.
I think you're a perfect example of that saying, live like nobody else now so you can live like nobody else later.
That's definitely what we adopted. And, but you get older and your tastes change, and there's no point in working so hard not to be able to enjoy some of the nicer things in life. You have to be able to travel. You have to be able to experience life and create those moments for your family and for yourself. So, you can work all through retirement. And then, if you decide you're going to travel when you're in your 70s and 80s, there's no guarantee that you're going to be healthy or have the ability to do that. So, we were really fortunate and grateful that we took those steps early on in our career. But, and had I had to do it all over again, I would do the same thing all over again.
So how did you and your wife stay so disciplined? Obviously, when you see friend after friend buying probably a bigger, fancier home than you all had, or the car, like you mentioned, how did you all not let that, maybe bum you, get you down, or want to just go that route? How did you all stay so disciplined?
It was difficult, especially as I eventually ended up getting better day jobs. So we sort of expanded our means. So we didn't, as we made more money, we were able to enjoy life a little bit better, with some of the material things, but, realizing that that's not the be all end all. So, we were able to start indulging, and then really, I think it was all about the planning. I mean, we got to a point where it was, hey, I've got to leave my day job because, I have to focus on this real estate thing full time. And at that 290 units, I was able to more than replace my income from a very well-paying day job to begin with. So we knew it was part of the plan, and we just, I think we stayed focused on the end result, but realized that when that time comes, you really have to take action. You can't look back. So
someone getting started now, I want to get into your transition into the syndication business, but someone that's getting started now, you mentioned, you would have done it the exact same way. Would you recommend other people to do it the same way, buying that duplex and kind of building their own portfolio before going into syndication?
Well, I think it's all individual. So for me, maybe I didn't have the knowledge or the confidence at the time. So for some people, I don't think jumping right into syndication has to be the immediate move. If they're not comfortable with that, find a duplex, flip some homes, wholesale some properties. There's nothing wrong with taking those steps, because they're all steps on that journey to your ultimate goal. And I've met some amazing young adults that are 21, 22 years old, 23, that are syndicating hundreds of units, and it's ridiculously impressive and ridiculously motivating. But they may be wired a little bit differently. So I think it really depends on the individual. So if somebody's risk averse, or perhaps they are just have that fear that they need to get over, then start small and start with baby steps, because ultimately those steps, you just build on them, and then it explodes. So, it took me a little bit longer to get into syndication, but I'm sure glad I did. And so I think, again, people just really have to look at their own risk tolerance, their own confidence, their own abilities. And, you don't want to go the opposite direction and not take any action. I mean, there's plenty of people that suffer from analysis paralysis, and they'll read every book and they'll underwrite hundreds of deals, but they never take any action. So I think the most important thing is just taking some form of action, whatever that looks like, and whatever that person's comfortable with, but just stretching beyond their comfort zone a little bit to kind of grow and improve their skill set and get to where they want to get to.
So go into some detail about your transition into syndication, and maybe some things that you encountered that you didn't expect, since you hadn't done a syndication, but you're very experienced, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But can you just talk about that transition?
Sure. So I for my larger syndication deal, the 86 unit, I brought in a co-general partner, had linked up with this individual a few years ago, and real estate is not his primary business. So he's a farmer by trade, has several businesses, I think about 14 or 15 different businesses that he owns or invests in, but he has experience with syndicating deals. He did a large deal in Florida about 10 years ago. And for me, I kept hearing about syndication. I kept hearing about this idea of limited partnerships and how to put these together. I just didn't have I had all this experience in real estate, but not the comfort or experience with raising money in this manner. And even though real estate was not this gentleman's idea, he's a super successful business person. It gave me that confidence of, hey, I've got somebody on my team that we can do this together. And it was a really complementary kind of partnership. And I had to get over my own fear and my own sort of limitations in my own head. I was, opposed to partnerships for years. I just had this stigma in my mind that they didn't work. They wouldn't work. It wouldn't work out. But syndication is the perfect model for bringing in quote unquote partners. So I got comfortable with that. And it took us about a year to really formalize what our goals were in terms of how we wanted to raise money, what the first deal is going to look like. And we, initially we didn't have a property in mind. We put our PPM together and we sort of backed into it. We found just stumbled across a property that was off market midsummer. And so I knew it was the right one. I looked at the property. It fit everything we were talking about. It was large enough that bringing in some limited partners would be great. I personally invested in the deal as well as my co-general partner. So I wouldn't syndicate a deal that I wouldn't invest in on my own. So I put my own money into it. I think it was a lot easier to raise capital than I thought. I probably would have spent more time developing more of an educational presentation. What I found was a lot of the investors, they signed up, they were very enthusiastic about it, but we still have a lot of room to go in terms of educating them on things that would be really beneficial to them, like depreciation and appreciation and cash flow. And just a lot of these accredited investors that haven't invested in a deal like this before are really relying on you to be the quarterback and really relying on you to lead them and guide them. And I think that was sort of a really good lesson for me that, hey, if we were really successful on the first raise, we raised $1.5 million in about 5.5, 6 weeks. And we oversubscribed. We had to shut it off. We have people knocking on the door to invest in the next deal. But I thought, gosh, how efficient and how great could this have been if we just had really focused on the educational component of this and really provide more value to our investors.
I got so many questions for you from what you talked about. So,
Okay.
I want, partnerships. You mentioned, partnering with, you brought in a co-general partner, but he was a businessman. He had done many things. He had shown success, but tell me about that partnership. Why him? There's probably many people that are successful businessmen, but what was it about him? Because it's a big topic, in
Yeah.
this business is, who do I partner with? How do I know that I can trust that person? And what was that for you?
So there's a couple interesting points that, you mentioned trust, and that's a huge thing. This gentleman, is in his late 50s. He's got a stellar track record in business in our community, and he's known as a high integrity individual. So I think that, number one, his reputation spoke for himself. We spent a lot of time getting to know each other before we even decided to partner up together. And I think that was important. Not everybody does it that way. Some people just, they know they want to marry their partner immediately, but we took a long time to get to know each other. And I think the biggest thing and why this is successful, and I just mentioned this to him the other day, we were reviewing our first quarter worth of financial results, was that why I think this is really good and why it works so well is that we have complementary personalities. We're not the same. So he's a lot different than I am. And so some of his strengths are areas of weakness that I have. And some of my strengths are, complement his weaknesses. So I think you have to find people that sort of are better than you at certain things. And you have to be able to admit that and acknowledge your own weaknesses. And maybe they're just even stronger at certain strengths you have. But I think it has to be a complementary approach, because if there's two people with the same personality, the same drive, the same kind of the same quirks, not that it's not going to work, but it's sort of redundant. So I think, to get better and to improve, continually improve and to expand what you're doing, you have to have somebody that brings some other element to your life or to your business that you didn't have before. So I think that, that just makes our partnership that much stronger, because we complement each other well.
Great points. I appreciate that. And you had mentioned developing initial goals, when you all partnered. Looking back, how would you say, you would change those goals now, or maybe some things you've learned since then, how you all could have improved your goals or goal setting, or maybe what were they?
Well, I think the number one thing is we just weren't specific enough. And that a lot of times I think, whether that's in your professional life, your personal life, real estate, whatever it is, we just had this goal that wasn't specific enough, and it wasn't really, it was measurable. I mean, we said, hey, we're going to raise $2 to $3 million to buy multifamily investment real estate in the Erie, Pennsylvania market. But we really could have drilled that down to say, we want to buy, a property in this price range for, this many unit count and this quality for X amount of dollars. We just weren't that specific, and we didn't have a timeline to it. So I think what took us probably a year and a half to finally get off the ground could have launched much sooner had we had that goal in mind. And so part of our meetings and what we've been talking about in the last few months is what deal number 2, number 3, number 4 look like for this specific partnership. And so I think that we'll get there much quicker, because we're very clear about what we're trying to accomplish.
Nice. You had talked about the property, it fit everything you were looking for. What were you looking for? What was it that it fit?
Sure. So we weren't really looking for that a huge value add opportunity. We were looking for something that was very stabilized, turnkey, but had some room, had some meat on the bone left on the deal that we could capitalize on. And what was interesting about this property is that it was stable, but all of the rents are below market. And the only reason the rents are below market is that there was a 700 plus unit property next door to it that had been severely distressed. I mean, there was porches falling off the building, fires, buildings getting condemned because of mold and all sorts of crazy stuff. So an out-of-town company bought that. They've been demolishing and doing the value add. And as they lease up their property, all of our rents will be able to go up. So I feel like the stress test when we underwrote the deal was that, the rents are at the bottom of the market. And when this property adjacent to us improves, ours will naturally improve as well. So I feel like even though we bought at the bottom, this thing cash flowed, it appraised perfectly. Everything about it was great, but we still have some upside without having to do any hard labor. All the physical parts of the property are just very well maintained. We bought from a solid operator that they're just in the process of trying to wind down or retire out of the business.
How'd you find that property?
Broker relationships. So
Okay.
have a really good friend of mine is a broker, or we've become really good friends over the years. And they had caught wind that this property might be getting listed with a CBRE or a Marcus and Millichap. They were exploring listing it so they could market it regionally or nationally. And I basically told my friend to insist to them that we get first look at the property. And I had to be a little bit aggressive and kind of play on the, do you really want to go through all the hassle of listing it with a national company? What price do you want? We'll be able to save you money. I can perform and I can get the deal done. The seller was a little difficult during that process because I think they really wanted to test that we could actually perform. But I think the important lesson for us in this thing, how we can improve our deal flow, was just nurturing those broker relationships, become friends with the brokers. And for us in our market, it's a little smaller, so everybody knows everybody, but just, treating everybody right, becoming friends with them. And if you're not friends with them, at least be friendly enough professionally that they think of you when they think of big time real estate. So yeah, I mean, that's how it came about. And we really stress the importance that, we're local, we can get it done. It's a way better route than listing with a national company.
You mentioned the seller. You had to convince the seller that you could close. How did you do that?
We put a lot of money hard into the deal. So, initially our down payment was only $50,000, but as we approached certain deadlines throughout the contract, we had to put additional money hard. And I never complained, just offered up the hard money and was very confident in the conversations with the seller that, hey, look, we're going to be able to get this thing done and we're going to be able to get it done quickly. So we ended up having about $250,000 hard into the deal by the time it closed. And only because, and we were about 3-4 weeks post the end of our contract, but we really pushed them to, said, look, the money's hard. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And just, we're using agency debt. Everything went pretty well through the process. Just when you're dealing with, Freddie Mac financing, there's always something that can get pushed a couple days here or there. So I think we just, kept a really close dialogue with the seller and kind of kept them apprised of the process along the way. And not every, not every seller is going to be as difficult during the process, but they have a ton of real estate. They've been in the business their whole life, and they just didn't really want any, any funny business. They just wanted to make sure it could get done. So what's really great about that is that that's teed up our next, hopefully, several deals, and they've got a great line of properties that we can look at down the line, and they know that we can close the deal, and we have investors that want to come in on these types of deals. So for me, it's not everything has to be value added. It just has to make sure that we can, provide value and provide a great return to our investors. If it's a plug and play deal like that, then we know that there's not going to be a lot of unforeseen expenses that come up. So it's a super predictable type of investment for our partners.
You mentioned stress test. Could you just, the listener that hadn't heard that term before, could you just tell us what that is?
Sure. So on the stress test of, sorry, having a little glitch here on my computer. Give me one sec.
I can still hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. So stress testing is basically when you're underwriting your deal, going through and looking at the numbers in a worst case scenario. So in layman terms, stress testing is just, hey, if the bottom falls out and all of a sudden we have a 15% vacancy rate, can I make this thing break even? Or, we're budgeting for capital expenditures. Well, what if there's 5 buildings on the property and some weird natural disaster hits that insurance wouldn't pay for? Are we able to stay whole? And usually, you have to be insured well. And if you have the proper insurance policy, you're safe from a lot of those things. So really, we spent a lot of time looking at the job market, the rental market. We look at, we know an underwriter is going to look at a 2-year, 3-year performance of a property, especially agency debt. I'm trying to go back as far as I can. So can you give me 4 years, 5 years, 6 years? And I try to look at trends and look at any blips in the radar, any anomalies, and get answers as to why that's occurred. So for instance, there was was a blip on the radar on this particular property in May and June that they were at about 14% vacancy rate. And, nothing to be scared about, because we ended up finding out it was just because of a bunch of medical student leases that had expired, and they got everything up and running. But when the underwriters are looking at the deal, we're looking at the deal, we need to understand those types of things. And hey, are we going to be okay over a 2, 3, 4-year average? Because things are going to go wrong, and you have to plan for it, and you have to be able to, you have to be able to just make sure that you're going to be able to meet your obligations no matter what, come hell or high water, basically.
So you all raised $1.5 million in 5 to 6 weeks, I think you said. Who was that from mostly? Previous business partners, family? How were you all able to do that so quickly on your first syndication?
Yeah. So no family members on my end. My partner and I basically created our quote unquote target list. People we knew professionally, people we knew that had mentioned over the years that would want to invest in real estate. He had a couple people that had participated in his prior deal from 10 years ago. And we basically just sent out phone calls and emails and text messages talking about what we had to offer. So I presented to people that I had, either knew really well or just people I knew casually that, hey, you had mentioned to me at one time that you would be investing in real estate. I have a deal I'm working on right now. No pressure. Just want to explain to you how it works and what it looks like. Would you like to grab a cup of coffee or schedule a phone call that we can review what the deal looks like? And so it was a very low pressure approach. But we just sort of went down that list of I say family and friends, although there was no family involved. And we just set up lunch meetings or coffee meetings or go out for a beer. It was a lot of time, but it really helped get to know. I think it's important because it helps you get to know the people investing in your deal up front. Now that gets harder and much more difficult the more deals you do and the more investors you bring in. That's not possible with every person every time, but I think you have to be willing to meet people face to face, meet them on their turf, and that's what we did. And one of my prior investors on some joint venture deals, he participated, and only because some of his business partners were involved, and I think he felt like he was going to be left out if he didn't join the deal. So he just said, hey, I want to do this, but just because he didn't want to feel like he was like the only kid not getting a toy or something. So, but it worked out. It worked out great. I mean, very few people subscribed right away. And that was one thing that I guess I could have expected, but it was still sort of stressful when you're trying to raise the money and your money's going hard on your down payment to the seller. You're trying to get these commitments locked in. So it's that ability to set up follow-up that's not high pressure. You never want to come across like a high pressure salesperson or anything like that, or at least that's not my style. So I would just set ticklers in my calendar to make sure that I followed up with the people we presented to. And quite frankly, some of them were really interested. The timing just wasn't right. So now the timing's right for them and they're looking for the next deal. So it is nice. I mean, you kind of cultivate these relationships, and I think it happens a lot quicker than you realize. I mean, 5-6 weeks is pretty quick. But I talked to guys that raise, more than that in like 2 days. And so I think that comes with building a track record. That comes with creating successful investments, and people know what your syndication model and your syndication business is all about. So once they get comfortable with you, it's off to the races, and you're successful with them once and twice, then they just want to be a part of everything that you're doing.
Jason, what's been the hardest part of the syndication process for you so far?
I think the hardest part was being patient. So, and what I mean by that, is in dealing with the seller and who if they have a lot of demands or strict timelines they're trying to adhere to, and then you're trying to work through your loan broker and through the agency to make sure that things happen on time, but also managing your investor relationship. So just kind of being cool, calm, collected, patient. That hey, everything's going to happen, but it's hard when you're working on deadlines like that. So it's just kind of keeping the big picture in mind and keeping everything on task, and not losing your cool or getting stressed out about the process.
What's some way you've recently improved your business that we can all apply to ours?
Well, I think a couple things. I think the biggest approach, or I've changed my mindset a little bit, and I've really started to look at my business and focused on making every investment as predictable as humanly possible. And so that's what I love about the syndication business, and that if I'm going to partner with people, I want things to be predictable. I want their investment return to be predictable every quarter, run like clockwork. Same thing with my own business. If I have certain properties that aren't performing the way I want, well, then it's unpredictable. And if I'm used to, if I want to pay myself, for instance, $10,000 a month out of a certain property, I want to be able to predict that. I want to be able to check that box every month and not have anything affect that. So I've really focused on how do I make each property, each part of my portfolio as predictable as humanly possible. And that's extremely beneficial, not only for your own mental wellness and emotional well-being. So you're not just getting beat up by various odds and ends at certain properties, but it's great for your banking relationships. It's great for your investors as you start to syndicate. Is just that you have a predictable model. And I think the biggest thing that we did to do that is the largest end of unpredictability is revenue. So if revenue's up and down, well, are we doing as great of a job as we can with property management and the lease ups, and is that affected by, maybe some capital improvements? Is the building not as attractive as it needs to be? So looking at kind of taking everything from that predictability approach and, basing our capital improvement projects around that, basing our like lease resident retention plans around that. And it's been a really beneficial thing for me because it's just simplified my life in the business. It's focusing on one thing, and that's just making everything as predictable as humanly possible.
What's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I think the number one thing, it's tough. There's a lot of things, but I think the thing that really catapulted me, and I have to credit my corporate life with this. When I was in medical device sales, there was a company I worked at that they really focused in on personal development. So, if you weren't reading or journaling or trying to improve yourself, then, you didn't fit in. And that was back in 05, 06. And that was really eye-opening to me. But at the same time, so with that in the theme of personal development, I started seeking out mentors and peer groups and joined our local apartment association, got involved on the board and things like that. And can you still see me here?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. And so surrounding yourself with people that have done it, that have been in the business longer than you, has been great for me. And that's probably the best thing that I ever did, was just trying to focus on myself and working on my weaknesses, improving my strengths, and then just trying to surround yourself with people that have done it before. I think the real estate business is very unique in the sense that there's people that might be 100 times more financially successful than you are, but they're willing to help. They're willing to give back. And I think when you can kind of break through those elements of fear or uncertainty, you'll find that, hey, there's a guy, he might be a billionaire, but nobody calls him up to go out to coffee. Or maybe he gets inundated with his schedule all the time with the wrong people that just want them for some other reason. They just want their money, or but you're looking for knowledge and you're looking for guidance. And a lot of people like to give back and don't really have that opportunity to do so. So I think the biggest thing is just trying to find people that have been where you want to go, and asking for advice, asking for help. And I mean, podcasts like yours are great in that sense. And I think that keep doing what you're doing, because you're bringing people in that by and large just love to give back and love to help. And so I encourage your listeners to do the same, just to reach out to people that have done it. I continually do that. I try to find those that have, done what I want to do, and just, try and soak up some knowledge from them and see how I can add value to their life too.
Jason, unfortunately we're out of time, but tell the listeners how you like to give back, and then also tell them how they can get in touch with you and learn more about your business.
Sure. I like to give back in terms of real estate. We definitely, I'm always up for mentoring, and I don't particularly charge for coaching or anything like that, but I'm always up for a phone call. Always up to offer any insight or just listen to what people are working on. So if people want to reach out, they can. This business affords us a lot of freedom and time and money to be able to give back to various causes we enjoy and like to be involved with. So, my wife and I are involved with Habitat for Humanity, some youth sports programs, different things like that. And it's really a good feeling. So I think that, whatever charities or nonprofit organizations, you feel that you're attracted to, it's definitely worthwhile to spend the time, spend the time doing that. And then if anybody wants to connect with me, they can find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, are probably the easiest ways to get a hold of me. Anybody can call me directly. If you want to put my number in the show notes, that'd be great. And my email as well.
Okay, we'll do that. And thanks again, Jason. You provided so much great content for the listeners, and I appreciate the listeners being with us today. I hope you'll go also to lifebridgecapital.com and connect with me and schedule a call, and go to our Facebook group so we can all learn from experts like Jason and grow our business together. And we will talk to each of you tomorrow.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.